Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, Africa can't do this alone. World leaders pledge more support for the continent that's contributed the least to climate change, but stands to bear the brunt of rising temperatures and environmental disasters as COP26 continues in Glasgow. Also, after a year after the brutal civil war began in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vows to bury his enemies in blood. And France's oldest and most prestigious literary prize is won by an African writer for the first time. Senegal's Mohamed Mbougar Sarr wows judges in a first-round decision to award the Goncourt Prize for his novel, The Most Secret Memory of Men. But first, one of the top priorities for Africa in responding to climate change is finding enough money to do so. On Wednesday, at the COP26 Climate Summit in Glasgow, African Union Chair Felix Tshisekedi said that the fight against climate change can't be won unless it's won in Africa. In 2009, richer nations promised $100 billion a year to help poorer ones adapt and mitigate the risks of rising temperatures, but the full amount's yet to be delivered. The UK said it will unlock $1.2 billion for climate adaptation in Africa, whilst the US, the EU and others have promised $8.5 billion to help South Africa give up coal. Now, global warming's seen African nations increasingly ravaged by disasters, from devastating floods in South Sudan to famine in Madagascar. Ivory Coast is paying a high price for being the world's top cocoa producer. The country also has one of the world's highest rates of deforestation, as land's cleared to grow the precious pods. The government's tried to tackle this by setting up a green army of 650 soldiers to protect what forests they have left.
Focused and armed, the Special Surveillance and Intervention Squad gears up for the day's mission. These men are part of a 650 soldier strong green army that has been deployed all over the country. Men who are trained to fight, but also specialized in agroforestry. According to Commandant Diarra, the squad's creation in 2018 came from a brutal observation.
À un moment donné, le gouvernement s'est rendu compte que la dégradation de notre patrimoine forestier commençait à prendre de l'ampleur. Des années d'indépendance à aujourd'hui, la Côte d'Ivoire a perdu près de 70% de son couvert forestier.
Ivory Coast's forest cover is increasingly threatened by human activity, from illegal logging and gold mining to clandestine intensive cacao culture. Keeping an eye out on the ground and also above it. The squad uses drones that can cover vast expanses of land and spot illegal activities. In a nearby public forest where logging is not allowed, the squad just discovered a pile of timber. Within minutes, they find suspects. After a half-hour-long manhunt, the soldiers arrest 3 young men. But after interrogating them, the unit is forced to let them go for lack of tangible evidence.
Malheureusement, ceux que nous avons appréhendés ne sont pas ceux qui font l'activité illégale, mais ils ne vont jamais dénoncer ceux qui sont de l'autre côté. Et c'est en cela que je leur donnais des conseils pour leur dire, pour leur faire comprendre que ce que nous menons comme action, c'est vraiment dans l'intérêt de tout le monde.
Beyond surveillance, educating rural communities on the forest ecosystem and its fragility is one of the squad's central missions.
A year after the brutal civil war began in Ethiopia, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed vowed to bury his enemies in blood. The country's in a state of emergency as Tigrayan forces from the north threaten to advance on the capital. Nicholas Rushworth has more.
The conflict in Ethiopia between the government and rebel forces in the country's northern Tigray region began a year ago. It did so on the orders of Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. The Nobel Peace Prize laureate vows to continue the fight.
We will bury this enemy with our blood and bones, and we will make the glory of Ethiopia stand high again.
The government announced a state of emergency for at least 6 months on Tuesday, with forces of the Tigray People's Liberation Front reported to be advancing on the capital. The government, under the state of emergency, can order citizens of military age to accept army duty. The Prime Minister has called on people to take up arms against TPLF rebels.
I'm young. I will take part in the war in whatever way young people can. I'm planning to head to the front line.
Those who can should join the fight. If required, I will not hesitate from joining.
Rebels say they now have control of the strategic towns of Dessie and Kombolcha in the Amara region, putting them just 400 kilometers from the capital. TPLF spokesman Getachew Reda said,
"If achieving our objectives in Tigray requires that we march to Addis Ababa, we will. But we are not saying we are marching to Addis Ababa."
The U.S. Special Envoy to the Horn of Africa will go to Ethiopia on Thursday for a 2-day visit amid increasing international concern. Thousands of civilians have been killed over the last year and more than 2.5 million people have been displaced. The UN estimates around 5 million people in Ethiopia's northern Tigray region are in urgent need of help.
The rescue effort continued in Nigeria on Wednesday as emergency workers tried for the third day to find survivors from a high-rise building that collapsed in Lagos. At least 22 people have been killed. It's still not clear what caused the accident, although there are concerns the building may not have been up to code. The governor of Lagos visited the site on Wednesday and touched upon the regularity with which buildings collapse in the country.
This is an event that could be described as a clear national disaster. This is an event that one can say that indeed mistakes were made from all angles, and this is an event that truly, really should not be happening in a modern day city like Lagos.
Now, Senegalese novelist Mohamed Mbougar Sarr has become the first Sub-Saharan African winner of France's top literary prize. The 31-year-old's only the third black winner of the Goncourt prize and wowed the jury on the first round of its voting with his novel, The Most Secret Memory of Men.
I'm obviously very happy. I'm honored and grateful to the Goncourt jury. I think the Academy is sending a very strong signal to a lot of people, to the French literary community, of course, but also to the whole of the French-speaking literary community.
Now, Caroline Laurent is an assistant professor of Francophone studies here in Paris. She joins me now. Caroline, so first of all, let's start off by giving us a quick idea of what Sarr's prize-winning novel's about.
So it's a story of a Senegalese writer, Diegane Faye, who is, during his studies, finding a book called The Labyrinth of the Inhuman, written by another Senegalese author, T.S. Eliman. And he's going to look for this book, and he's going to look for his authors who has disappeared after writing the book. So
there are some similarities in the plot and Sarr's own journey. He's a Senegalese writer who came to Paris to study literature. Is the book at all supposed to be about himself?
So first, it's not only about himself, it's about other authors. And for instance, the story of this book and the writer who disappeared is a true story. It's based on the story Yambo Wol Golem, Le Devoir de Violence. It won the Prize Renaudot in 1968. And then following some issues with plagiarism, the author disappeared. He went back to Mali and disappeared. So there is that connection. And it's also, I think, Faye, the author, is almost an alter ego to Sarr. I think there are a lot of points in common. They're both young. They're both Senegalese in Paris, like you said. So there's definitely some connections here. And they're also young writers. And that's very important.
Now, how significant is it that France's oldest literary prize has finally been awarded to a Sub-Saharan African?
So I'm a little bit conflicted in this because it's very important. It's only the third Black person to be winning the prize, the first African author. But actually his novel is about, it's going against that. It's going against this type of reading that focuses on an origin, that focuses on the skin color. And it's inviting many different types of readings from many different parts of the world. And like he says in when he won the prize, his emphasis is more on the language, on the Francophone world. No matter where you're from, as long as you have this common language that is French, that is what you should examine, not a skin color.
Mm-hmm. And the prize itself is just €10. So what does the win likely mean for his career going forward, if you can guess?
I mean, he's a very young author. He's only 31. He's the youngest author having won the Goncourt. So that's important. That's important because his career, I think, is probably launched with this book, at least in the Francophone world. I think the French establishment is a little bit more conservative, so we'll see about that aspect. But if we look at the prices of L'Anomalie, the book that won the previous year, I think it's going to imply a lot of sales. And that's very good because there are two small publishing houses, so Philippe Rey and also Jim Sam, who's a Senegalese publishing house. So I think it's very important in terms of circulation and publishing of African texts.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Caroline, for speaking to us. That is, though, unfortunately, all we have time for on Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us, and do so again if you can. Take care.